Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 5, text number 24. Gateta durvasasi som parisho Tvijopayoga tipavitram arha aharat Rishir vimoksham yasanam chaviksha Mene swaviryam cha paranubhavam. Gate, on his return. Ata, then. Durvasasi, the great mystic yogi Durvasa. Sa, he, the king. Ambarisa, Maharaj Ambarisa. Dvija Upayoga, most suitable for a pure Brahmana. Ati Pavitram, very pure food. Aharat, gave him to eat, and he also ate. Rashe, of the great sage. Vimoksham, release. Vyasanam, from the great danger of being burned by the Sudarsana cakra. Cha, and viksha, seeing, mene, considered, saviryam, about his own power, cha, also, para anubhavam, because of his pure devotion to the Supreme Lord. Translation. After 1 year, when Durvasa Muni had returned, King Ambarisa sumptuously fed him all varieties of pure food, and then he himself also ate. When the king saw that the Brahmana Durvasa had been released from the great danger of being burned, he could understand that by the grace of the Lord, he himself was also powerful. But he did not take any credit, for everything had been done by the Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. A devotee like Maharaj Ambarisa is certainly always busy in many activities. Of course, this material world is full of dangers that one has to meet, but a devotee, because of his full dependence on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is never disturbed. The vivid example is Maharaj Ambarisa. He was the emperor of the entire world and had many duties to perform. And in the course of these duties, there were many disturbances created by persons like Durvasa Muni. But the king tolerated everything, patiently depending fully on the mercy of the Lord. The Lord, however, is situated in everyone's heart. Sarvasya chaham hridi sanivishta. And he manages things as he desires. Thus, although Maharaj Ambarisa was faced with many disturbances, the Lord, being merciful to him, managed things so nicely that in the end, Durvasa Muni and Maharaj Ambarisa became great friends and parted cordially on the basis of bhaktiyoga. After all, Durvasa Muni was convinced of the power of bhaktiyoga, although he himself was a great mystic yogi. Therefore, as stated by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita 6:47, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatanantaratmana shradhavan bhajate yomam same yuktatamo mataha. Of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. Thus, it is a fact that a devotee is the topmost yogi, as proved in the dealings of Maharaj Ambarisa with Durvasa Muni. Well, for those who prefer spoiler alerts, it's too late because we already came to Chapter 5, Durvasa Muni's life spared. And in this pastime, one from a certain perspective, a materialistic perspective of who has power and who doesn't, one might expect Durvasa Muni to be victorious over Ambarish, victorious in the sense that Durvasa Muni is, through his power of austerities, is a fearsome character. He appears in many places in the Shastras, in fact, even in Vrindavan. He's there in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad. He's known for various traits. One is that he eats a lot. I'm just saying, it's there in the Shastra. He can eat a lot. Some people have that reputation. And he also has many followers. Some people, they just have a lot of followers. When they show up in town, it's not that they're just there. It's a festival, it's a Kumbh Mela. They come with everybody. And Durvasa Muni has, 60,000 followers he comes with. So, you know how it is. Somebody comes, you get a phone call, they're coming to your house, and then you have to rearrange everything. Rearrange your schedule. You have to go get ingredients to cook. And plus you have to clean up the house really fast too, right? Yeah. So then if somebody's coming and they have a lot of followers, it's even more. Everything comes to a new level. So Durvasa Muni is fearsome not only in his acquired mystic power through his austerity, but also because he has just so much baggage. Wherever he goes, you got to feed him a lot. And plus, he's got 60,000 followers that you have to accommodate also. And we know various stories about him coming, even with the Pandavas, and Draupadi was able to rise above the danger of that situation by Krishna's suggestion that just feed me whatever's left in your pot, and then they'll all be full, and then they won't come back. So we can understand that there are various places where Durvasa Muni imposes some dangerous situation. And in the story, here in the 9th canto, we have the example of Ambarish Maharaj. Ambarish Maharaj is revered throughout the Shastra. In fact, just recently in the 10th canto, reading about Nriga. Nriga was a king, and he's not considered to be a fully pure devotee. In fact, he was very much dedicated to Karmakanda. He did get a benediction from a devotee because he had given money to build a temple, plus he had given copies of the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita to this Vaishnav who had requested it, and that Vaishnav blessed him that you will see Krishna face to face. And from that day, although he was a Paka Karmakandi, he started desiring to see the Lord face to face. That's the power of the benediction of a Vaishnav, that it can instill a sense of desire in one's heart that, oh, I do want to see Krishna, even if that wasn't one's intention before. That's the blessing of a Vaishnav. Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra Koi, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. The perfection is that one changes one's desire. Because, as we know from Shastra, that devotees have no desire. But Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami, Sakali Ashanta, everyone else has some angle here in the material world. They're doing it, they're doing their austerity forgetting something for themselves, and therefore they're ashanta. But a Vaishnav is, therefore they're shanta. But a Vaishnav is ashanta because he has no desire for himself, only to serve Krishna. So in the commentary in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, it's mentioned by way of comparison by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that the Nriga, although he had a desire to see the Lord, and he did see the Lord directly because he had been cursed, and then he became a lizard, and then Krishna's children couldn't pull him out of the well, and then Krishna came in personally, wrong hand, left hand, he pulled him out, pulled the lizard out of the well. But the acharyas say, but he wasn't a great devotee like Maharaj Ambarish. See, his name came up, Maharaj Ambarish, because even in his Vaidhi bhakti, they say, he was way greater than Nriga because of his mood of pure devotion. And this is something, by way of contrast, Krishna also points out in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna, is speaking about the ways in which, in answer to Arjuna's questions at the beginning of the chapter, one goes to various destinations and what happens when one leaves one's body. And Krishna describes how there are yogis who dedicate themselves to mechanical processes in order to achieve higher destinations, even liberation from the material world. Or he describes prayanakale manasa chalena bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva bruvor madhye pranam avesha samyak satam param purusham apaiti divya yadaksharam veda vedovadanti vishanti adyata yovitaraga ichanti to brahmacharyam charanti tate padam sangrahena pravakshe sarvadvarni samyamya manuhridi narujyacha murdhadhaya manapranam astito yoga dharanam Om ityakaksharam brahma vyaharam manusmaram yaprayati samatpa deham sayati paramam gatim. But then he says, Ananya cheta satatam. Just in summary, those verses have to do with mechanical yogic techniques to learn how to manipulate the energies in one's body, move the soul to the top of the head, be able to put one's concentration between the two eyebrows, so forth, practicing austerities, living away from people, or just taking very austere vows, and so forth. And then Krishna says, Ananya cheta satatam yomam smarati nityasaha tasyaham sulabha partha nityayuktasya yogina. That if you want the process that's sulabha, it's easy to attain, and then just always think of me. Ananya, there's nothing else. Ananya, there are no other considerations. Cheta, in one's mind. Satatam, and one's always like that. Yomam smarati nityasaha, and one's always thinking of me. So that can be done through the process of devotional service. And then Krishna says, when one has some sense of love and you're remembering me, I'm easy to attain. It's not so difficult. There's not so many different technical ways that you have to contort yourself and aim your soul towards a certain destination. And he describes later in the chapter how there are various ways of leaving the world. Krishna, what is that? Third to the last verse. Shukla Krishna gati yete jagata shashvate mate ekaya yat yanavritim anyaya vartate puna. You can, and it's a summary of the last couple of verses that he mentions, that you can leave in light or you can leave in darkness. But naite sriti partajanan yogi muyati kashana, doing the whole 8th chapter today. That the devotees, they know that there are these options, but they're not concerned about it, because the main option is just to remember Krishna. And Maharaj Ambarish, although he was in the hierarchy, societal hierarchy, at the time considered to be on a lower rung than Durvasa Muni, because he was a sage. He had peg shoes. I don't know what kind of shoes Maharaj Ambarisa wore, but they weren't peg shoes. And Durvasa Muni had this sense of, here he comes, powerful sage. He's done his austerities. And who's Maharaj Ambarisa? He's a householder. And what's more, he's a king. He's got a Tesla. He's got all these duties to do, kids everywhere, this and that. But Maharaj Ambarisa is glorified in the Bhagavatam as mastered the ways of living in the world and using everything for Krishna. A prime example because he's a king and he has all these material facilities, but he uses every single one of them and every one of his senses in Krishna's service. So in comparison, the acharyas bring his name up in the 10th canto and they say, well, he's way better than Nriga. Nriga had a sense of himself when he mentioned to Krishna, who Krishna asked him, he debriefed him after he saved him from the well, and he said, so how'd you get here? I mean, Krishna knew, but he wanted all the kids to know. They were all there listening, and Nriga said that I had received this a curse, and I came into this body. And he also bragged a little bit, and he said, actually, I'm very generous. I gave away a lot of things. And the sages say, see, he's not that pure, because he wouldn't have boasted about his own qualifications. Whereas when we find Maharaj Ambarisa, he's a very humble soul, unassuming. He considers himself the lowest of the low and the servant of everyone else. So when Durvasa Muni comes to visit him, and there's a tricky situation, that is that Ambarisa Maharaj had been performing a vow, an Ekadashi vrat, for a long time, and he was just about to break his vrat, or end it at the proper time. I mean, if you've invested that much, when the time comes, you want to make sure you do it at the right time. And of course, Krishna says in the Bhagavad, Shubha Shubha Paleri from Mokshase Karma Bandhanai, that devotees aren't also technically concerned with all these details about when the vrat exactly is finished and so forth, because Shubha, whether there's something auspicious or inauspicious, main thing is that the service is done. So, in any case, he had put so much into the vrat, and there was a time when he would break it. All his ministers and priests were there to advise him. And what awkward timing, because that's when Durvasa Muni showed up. And you're looking at your watch and you go, yeah, I got to take care of him. But then Durvasa goes, I'll be back. I'm going to go take a bath and I'll be back. And then Durvasa, and Ambarisa is thinking, now the time is coming. What should I do? Have you ever been in a conundrum like that? Say yes. It happens all the time. It constantly, whatever we pick out, there's going to be some complication. It's going to get awkward. So he consulted his ministers. What should I do? If I break the fast, it's a big offense because I ate before my exalted guest. And if I don't break the fast, then it's a waste. I did this whole thing and I didn't finish it on time, and the time is now. So what should I do? So they came up with a verse, which you have to always have some verse to justify, which was something that Balaram did when he had killed Romaharshan, and then they said, the sages said, whoa, wait a minute, we already gave him long life, and then they came up with a verse, and it's like, well, the son is the same as the father because he carries on the family tradition and so forth, so we'll just give it to him and consider that he's the representative, same as the father. So they also came up with a verse which was, if you drink water, it's breaking a fast, but not breaking a fast. It's eating, but not eating. So, okay, that'll work. And he drank a little water to break his fast. Durvasa Muni has some mystic perceptions through his austerity. So when he came back, he said, wait a minute. How could you be so offensive? I'm here. You're hosting me. Who do you think you are? You ate before me. He drank a sip of water to break his fast. But Durvasa Muni, because of his sense of himself, of his austerities, had developed this egoistic view that I'm better than Ambarish Maharaj. This is something that the Shastra, I should say, this is something Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has told us, don't do. Don't feel entitled, and also don't develop the sense that I'm better than others. We've seen it even in preaching Krishna consciousness. A group can get successful, and then they'll think, only we know how to preach. We're doing it right. Everybody else is really in some far-flung place. They don't know what they're doing. And this is a step towards falling away from the path of pure devotional service. Lord Chaitanya therefore advised, Trinadapi sunichena todor api suhishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sada hari. If someone gives you some accolade, you pass it up to your guru and say, I don't know, I'm just following. I don't have any power myself. And this is a realization that we see Maharaj Ambarish is coming to. Even though he already knew this, it became greatly pronounced. Reading the translation again, he says, after 1 year, when Durvasa Muni had returned, King Ambarish sumptuously fed him all varieties of pure food, and then he himself also ate. When the king saw that the Brahmana Durvasa had been released from the great danger of being burned, he could understand that by the grace of the Lord, he himself was also powerful. As he's realizing, Maharaj Ambarish saying, wow, I have some power. But he did not take any credit, for everything had been done by the Lord. So Durvasa Muni, being angry at Ambarish Maharaj, had then used his mystic power. He pulled a lock of hair from his head, and yogis somehow they keep some power in their hair. There are stories about that. And then he conjured this figure who would come and destroy Maharaj Ambarish. If you can imagine such a thing, becoming so indignant that somebody drank a little water before you. I mean, it's possible. On a subtle level, if I entertain my false ego enough, it'll start inflating, and then the next thing I know, why didn't they give me? I'm entitled. I should have that first before the other person. Why they gave the ghee lamp to him first? One can think, like, don't they know I'm over here? And like, what happened to the etiquette in this place? These people really don't know anything. They don't know who I am. This happens, we see sometimes a person who's of consequence, maybe in City Hall, gets pulled over by the police, and then they have a mantra. It's like, don't you know who I am? And nowadays, because of the great benediction of YouTube, they get canceled because there they are saying, you don't know who I am. I don't deserve a ticket. And then everyone says, okay, you're canceled because of your attitude. And nobody likes that attitude. So Durvasa Muni created this fiery, powerful, mystic, monstrous creature who was going to come and attack Maharaj Ambarish. But before he got there, the Sudarsana cakra, Krishna's protective weapon, who protects all the devotees and who he uses to liberate demons like Shishupal, cut his head off clean with the Sudarsana chakras. So clean, not a drop of blood fell because he didn't want to contaminate the ceremonial area. So that came and it vanquished the fiery creature. And then it went after Durvasa Muni. So this is a lesson that when we develop an attitude of entitlement and we become indignant towards somebody and think, don't they know who I am? And when we put that energy out, it'll come after us next. We're tiny souls. We're servants of Krishna. Best to stay in our lane. Don't become a great personality in a sense of in your own head. Yes, we should do great things, but we should always revert to this mood of Maharaj Ambarish. Okay, I see that there's some power coming through me, but it's not me. He says, but he did not take any credit, for everything had been done by the Lord. Durvasa Muni was then chased by the Sudarsana chakra that was right behind him, burning him. And he charged up to the planet of Brahma. So that all escalate. That's what they call it, right? All escalate. So there's always a thought in the mind of a materialistic person, let me escalate this to some other more powerful, materially powerful personality who can solve the situation. And this is a story in which we find the ultimate escalation. He takes it from Brahma, who says, takes it to Shiva, takes it to Vishnu. He's God. Everything emanates from him. Yashaika nishvasitakala matavalamya matak paratanam nanyat, etc. And what does he say? You got to go to Ambarish Maharaj. I can't help you because the devotees only are my heart. And I'm emboldened to, I'm subservient to them. I'm controlled by them. They're my heart and soul. I can't help you personally. You'll have to go to Maharaj Ambarish. That's when Durvasa Muni got his lesson. He realized that Ambarish Maharaj was dear to the Lord, and as Krishna says in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that the devotees are more dear to me than my own life. There's nobody more dear to me than my devotees. So, on the advice of the Lord, he came back to Durvasa Muni, to Ambarish Maharaj, and offered his prayers and says, please save me. And Ambarish Maharaj, in all humility, seeing that this person was coming and taking shelter of him, he thought, what? And Ambarish then offered prayers to Sudarsana chakra and started glorifying him, the Lord's ultimate weapon personified, and talking about his glories. And in that way, he relieved Durvasa Muni of the heat of the Sudarsana chakra and forgave him. But then his mindset was that it's all the mercy of the Lord. Even though he could see that the Lord had deferred to him and that he had some power, he didn't take any credit. He said everything had been done by the Lord. And Prabhupada uses the phraseology in the purport is so helpful, isn't it? Where he says that the Lord arranged everything. He uses the word arranged. And although there may be some inconvenience in our life as we're performing devotional service, we can understand, we should understand, that Krishna is arranging everything. Our position is to maintain the sense of giving all credit to Krishna, to go on accepting whatever facility he gives, including some empowerment, but then offering it all back to Krishna, that this is coming from you, it has nothing to do with me. If I touch entitlement, it's the proverbial third rail. Do you know the third rail? Somebody look it up. It's not in the dictionary, it'll probably be online. What does the third rail mean? It has something to do with electricity running through tracks. If you touch two of them, you're not going to be electrocuted, but if you touch the third one, then you'll be fried. And The third rail comes when I accept credit or I have a sense of entitlement. So devotional service, among many other things, means the attitude in which we depend on Krishna. For the result, we also tolerate whatever inconveniences happen in the interim because we know that they're Krishna's arrangement to bring me to a particular situation. And Prabhupada mentions it in the light of the Bhagavad when he says, sometimes it appears that those who worship Krishna are becoming poorer and poorer. And Prabhupada said, but that is not a fact. He said, look at the Pandavas. Although they were exiled for some time, Krishna gave them back the kingdom and everything else worked out perfectly. But one has to go on with determination despite the awkwardness as one performs devotional service, knowing that Krishna is making the arrangements. What's the third rail? Our research is... do you look stunned, or are you just being humble and modest?
The third rail is a metaphor for any issue so controversial that it is charged and untouchable, to the extent that anyone who dares to broach the subject will invariably suffer. And it comes from the high voltage third rail in some electric railway systems.
Yeah, so there's a third rail. Durvasa touched it. Look at the result. Ambarisa, as the devotee and representative of all those practicing Vaidhi Bhakti, didn't touch the third rail. So one shouldn't touch the third rail even internally. We have to continually come back to, I'm a humble servant. Jeev Krishna Das e Bishwas Korletor Dukho Nai. Our suffering, the conundrums, the awkwardness comes when my attitude strays onto the tracks and then touches the third rail. And next thing I know, I'm electrocuted by that energy that I'm the doer. So Krishna also recommends in Bhagavad Gita, Nirmana mohajita sangodosha. Don't take credit. Nirman. Don't get absorbed in that energy. Continue to be a humble servant. Now we'll take some reflections or questions. And they better be good. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember your number and demand the microphone when it comes to time for you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, when you were mentioning about that Ambarisa Maharaja's mood of not accepting any credit for his power, I was remembering how Arjun Mahashaya also did the same thing. When he was trying to bring the wives of Lord Krishna after Lord unmanifested his pastimes, he was defeated by the Nishadas. And he thought, like, all my powers, my Gandiv, my Akshay Tunir, they're powerless because Krishna's mercy is not there. And he could understand it, that it's not me. It was Krishna who was doing it, and he was narrating in a beautiful manner to Yudhishthir Maharaj all these experiences. So I could connect that same, like all the top level devotees have same kind of mood of unassuming.
And in it's such a nice point, Prabhu, as usual. And he reverted to his conversation with Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And he remembered Bhagavad Gita. If all else fails, go back to the Bhagavad Gita. And all the trash in his thoughts subsided when he started that track of, oh yeah, what did Krishna actually tell me? And it reminds me of an author, a recent author who had written a book called Yoga and the Dark Night of the Soul. And he mentions in his writing that he had been trying to write a book, but his attitude wasn't right. And when he remembered Bhagavad Gita, that just fight for Krishna. Whatever you're doing, do it for Krishna. Don't do it. If there's a scintilla. If there's a scintilla of, I'm doing this for myself, third rail. That's the third rail. Even a scintilla. Because, after all, you might just say, I only touched the third rail a little bit. You touch any electrical surface, even a little bit, you're going to feel it through your whole body. And so he wrote in that book that he had successfully produced, published, and so forth. He said, when I remembered Krishna's teaching that don't be the doer, don't you write this book, write it as an offering, write it as a service. He said all of a sudden everything started to flow. The creative process opened up. The sense of nirman, that I'm doing this, is what blocks all the creative devotional flow. And when we give credit where credit is due, says Vrajabihari Prabhu, the professional counselor for those who are, what are they called? Conflict resolution. He did it professionally for many years. He said, when you give credit where credit is due, you don't lose credit. It's good to remember, because that's also part of the process of nirmana, that you take somebody else's idea and it's like, well, I don't want to exactly give them credit because it sounds so good, and therefore I'll just take credit. And another luminary had told me once that if you take credit where it's not due to you, then later on you'll get blamed for things you didn't do. So if you ever get blamed for something, I didn't do it. It's like, yeah, but that's because you took credit some other time for something you didn't do. Okay, who's number 2? Yes, Rasa Sindhu Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Thank you for your class. I was reflecting that there's a model that a lot of companies follow these days. It's called the model of conscious leadership. And it's coming from a book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And the entire model is a single line. And they say that at any given moment of time, you're either above the line and you're below the line. And above the line means you're curious, you're open. And then below the line means closed and being attached to being right and things like that. And I was realizing that this Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni kind of reflect both sides of the line. And I was thinking that Durvasa shows the example of fully being in the ego and identifying with it. He complained, he had entitlement, he had escalation, pride, followers, and power. What stood out to me was that the verse started with 1 year. For 1 year, he remained in that behavior. And there's lifetimes that goes by to remaining in that. And then he extended his power in the beginning. He demanded food, and his dependence was on his power, and he caused disturbances, Prabhupada writes. On the other hand, Ambarish Maharaj, he displayed gratitude, humility, patience, tolerance, servitude, dependence, curiosity, fearlessness, and then also proper etiquette, a total above-the-line behavior. He cooked high-quality food and offered it to Ambarish Maharaj, and he realized his power towards the end, as opposed to Durvasa, who was realizing his power in the beginning. And then he was depending on the grace of the Lord, and he brought peace. So complete examples of the two behaviors and how Shastra is still relevant, in the sense that the companies may come up with modern terminologies and things, but it always goes back to Srimad Bhagavatam and Shastra.
Yeah, that's a nice comparison. And it reminded me that in the beginning of the story, when the fiery, I keep resisting calling him a demon because I don't want to make offense. I don't know if he was a demon, if it's mentioned there. But that fiery creature that approached him, conjured by Durvasa Muni, Ambarish wasn't afraid. And one of the ways that one becomes afraid is because of claiming proprietorship. I think I have something and I don't want to lose it. We find that in human behavior. There's a way that I get a little corner office somewhere and I have my sense of power, the part I control. And that becomes part of my identity. Rather than depending on Krishna for one's power, one might depend on one's title and say, because I have a title, therefore I have influence and power. But it's not from that one derives actual spiritual influence. It's from one's pure dedication to the practice of devotional service. It's Krishna's mercy. I saw an interview with a famous athlete personality who's since retired, and somebody had asked him, about his lifestyle, and he said, I don't have a phone. And the person was reasonably surprised because everybody has a phone. He said, you don't have a phone? He said, yes. He said, because I can become distracted by the phone and even look at, bad things on the phone. He said, and if I do that, then I won't get God's mercy. He repeated that a couple of times, and it kind of struck me. There's a way in which all power comes from Krishna, ultimately. Those kinds of power that come from the material nature, Prabhupada said, these are short-lived, and in the end they'll be exposed. So one of the ways that Ambarisa Maharaj's great spiritual power was exhibited is he didn't flinch, because he had nothing to lose. He knew his only asset was his humble service to Krishna. And whether he had, when even his material body was in apparent peril, he didn't flinch, because fear comes from that attachment that I don't want to lose something material. Okay, who's number 3?
Hare Krishna. I was struck with the fact that Krishna could have outright killed the Rasa Muni at any point, but he chose to create a perfect situation for not only the Rasa to grow, but also to come into devotion. And I just really appreciate that in moments when we've created really bad situations for ourselves and we've offended devotees, Krishna wants us to have every chance to grow and become better.
Although he did kill Maharshan. So it's situational. That was pretty extreme, but Balaram recognized the severity of the situation, because here was somebody representing the Sampradaya and teaching others who was not qualified, and he couldn't tolerate that, so he killed him. But your point's well taken. There are ways. Krishna arranges everything. That's in the purport. He makes arrangements appropriately for each person in each situation. So sometimes he'll spare the person so that they can bring the lesson back, and other times he'll vanquish somebody, and there's no harm in that also, because those who are vanquished by Krishna also get purified for the effect. Okay, who is number 4?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you for the nice class. Maharaj, a question, very, very important about this entitlement, feeling entitlement. Even a pauper is proud of his penny, so sometimes even at our level, we do feel I'm the doer and feel there's some achievement, and in fact it almost feels for me impossible not to touch the third line. So what is the practical way to ensure we don't get into that mood, or if we are there, come back?
Yeah, I think you said practically impossible to not touch the third rail?
For me.
Huh?
For me.
For you. Talking about it is helpful. Inculcation, remembering where we're aligned. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhuktaram Yagatapasam. He reminds us that I'm the enjoyer, and Prahlad Maharaj remembers that when he says his prayers, Naivatmana Prabodhinam Nija Labhapurno, that Krishna, you're complete, and when I give to you, then I feel complete. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you give to me, and you'll feel complete. It's counterintuitive. Everyone thinks, no, I'll hold it back here, because without this, I won't feel complete. And without knowing that, without inculcating that sense of Krishna's the center, and if I feed him, then I'll be fed. If I try to feed myself, then it's not going to satisfy me. Knowing that, and then the greatest miracle is if we actually get the strength to do that. because I'm so rooted in the idea that I'm my material body, and along with that comes the sense of survival of the fittest in the material world. And then unless I assert myself and put myself first, and unless I grab as much as I can and hold on to it, then I'm going to starve. I'm going to die. Jivo jiva sajivanam. That's kill or be killed. Every living being is food for another. But on the spiritual platform, Krishna says there's a different sense of the world. He says, you understand that I don't die anyway. Just from a basic spiritual understanding. And then that sense that ultimately Krishna is the witness of everything. And ananya cheta satatam yo mam smarati nityasaha. If I'm remembering Krishna's words, that if you remain sincere, then I'll give all facility. We can have experience of that if we take those words. And once we experience it, then we're able to make that the purpose of my life, is to make sure that Krishna is pleased. So it's by hearing and then by practically applying and seeing the difference between when I try to assert myself, and notice the difference between how I get burned by my false ego again and again, and when I take the role of the servant of Krishna and try to serve the situation. You never lose credit. Madhavendra Puri experienced that. He didn't want any credit for anything. Devotees generally don't want that. And when he heard how this news is spreading that Krishna had deferred to him and had saved some sweet rice for him, and he said, I'm going to leave and go some other place because I don't want anybody approaching me like this. I'll go somewhere else. Such a person is getting internal satisfaction from his or her relationship with Krishna and realizing that external credit I get from other people, it can turn at any moment. In fact, we find all the time in the material world, the fame somebody gets, a few years later, they're canceled. You're canceled. So you can't depend on that. However you build your portfolio here in the material world, anybody can cancel it at any time for all kinds of reasons you might even forgot about. We forget what we've done in the world. I remember going for my final interview to get my global entry. It was in Canada at Niagara Falls. And they pulled me into a little room and said, have you ever been arrested? Hey, I'm a law-abiding citizen from a suburb, middle-class suburb in California. What do I have any business getting arrested for? I was too young to get into the major war protests where I might have got arrested or whatever like that. But I had to say, probably, because I knew full well, just in a general sense, that I've been arrested many times. That's a long story, but it has to do with going out as a young person in robes and distributing books in public places, and people saying, you're going to jail. You stand in the wrong place, you talk to the wrong person, etc. I've been thrown in plenty of jail cells. So I said, probably. And she said, you'll have to be more specific. So then Super Soul reminded me in that very second, I said Chicago, because I remembered there was a case, although I was not at fault in the slightest, except for I was out there distributing books. I won't go into all the details, but it ended up I had to go back, a court case, and the other person actually had to fly back, much to that person's chagrin, because they just thought they'd file a false charge and be done with it. And then somehow the case wasn't closed. I forgot. So I remembered at that time, anything in the material world can pop up. Who knows, from this life, previous life, from 1,000 lifetimes ago. Now it's an opportune time for that to come up again. So don't suddenly think, because I've had a short run of success and I seem to be okay, that I'm not liable to be blamed for anything else. So it's dangerous to get into the energy of trying to put oneself forward and claim that I deserve respect, because who knows? What have I done in the past? It'll come up at any time. Better keep your head down and stay absorbed in service. Give the credit to somebody else. No, you take it. I can't handle it. I can't touch that third rail. It'll fry me. And when you find in a devotional community, when that's truly a realization of the devotees, there's truly a sense of spiritual communion with Krishna. It's very powerful when you see leaders who are preaching this all the time and then the devotees actually take up that mood. You notice it when you go there. In that Sangha, you'll see, oh, this is a different level. It's a spiritual level. And that's what spiritual community is all about. That's what individual practice of spiritual life is about, is being a humble servant of Krishna. Don't take the credit. Don't touch the third rail. Okay, who's number 5? Shravan.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So I have another reflection on the same topic of Ambarisa Maharaj not taking the credit for what had been done. I was going through the Bhakti Jumpstart Module 2 Personal Reflections, and I remember this one verse from the Bhagavad Gita 4.18, Karmanya karmaya pashyeda karmani cha karmayaha, how one who sees inaction and action and action and inaction is very intelligent. And it reminded me of Ambarisa Maharaj, because he doesn't take credit for any of the actions that he's doing, because he knows that Krishna is the fountainhead of everything, that it's not him doing anything, but he's just he's an instrument in the hands of the Lord, nimitta matram bhava savyasachin. And this reminded me that he is a really good example of how he knows how to counter all reversals in life. How in the Bhagavatam 6.17.28 is explained, Narayana parasarve nakutashana bibhyati, how if you're surrendered onto Krishna or Vishnu, then no matter what, you can go through anything in life, because you know that Krishna will take care of you. So then that's the main way how you can go through any reversals in life. It's not fear the worst and then you can get through anything. It's that you know that Krishna is going to protect you no matter what, and that everything in store for you is decided by Krishna. So then you don't have to fear anything. So
Thank you. And nice citations as well. Okay, so that was it. Everyone please move up by 7.2 inches. But it starts with the foundational laying of the mats. It makes it more difficult. So whoever lays the mats, it's better to move them up closer to start with. I'm going to read the verse one more time for our consideration. It says, after 1 year, when Durvasa Muni had returned, King Ambarisa sumptuously fed him all varieties of pure food. And then he himself also ate. So even in this sense, when Durvasa had come and cowered before Ambarisa Maharaj, Ambarisa still maintained the etiquette. He said, oh, he's my guest, I'm a householder, I'll serve him. He's very humble. And then he ate after him, even though he had been fasting so long. When the king saw that the Brahmana Durvasa had been released from the great danger of being burned, he could understand that by the grace of the Lord, he himself was also powerful. In other words, Krishna had obviously deferred to Ambarisa Maharaj. He said, I can't release him, but if you go to Ambarisa Maharaj, then you can be released. And he saw that. He could see it. It's not that he didn't recognize that Krishna had deferred to him, but then he defers back to Krishna. He said, but he did not take any credit, for everything had been done by the Lord. And here's Prabhupada's response. A devotee like Maharaj Ambarisa is certainly always busy in many activities. Of course, this material world is full of dangers, and that one has to meet. But a devotee, because of his full dependence on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is never disturbed. The vivid example is Maharaj Ambarisa. He was the emperor of the entire world and had many duties to perform. And in the course of these duties, there were many disturbances created by persons like Dāsa Muni. But the king tolerated everything, patiently depending fully on the mercy of the Lord. This is important also, the context. When you take up service in the Sankirtan movement, you'll be disturbed. If you don't say anything and you kind of stay out of sight, out of mind, you'll probably be criticized anyway for doing that. But if you come out and you assert yourself as a representative of the Sampradaya, in any way, shape, or form, somebody's going to take a shot at you. And you have to be able to process that. And the way to process it is the way that Ambarisa Maharaj did it, which is to be very humble and give credit to the Lord. And also, taking these disturbances as, although it's not mentioned here specifically, but this is our attitude, that whatever disturbances come to me are a test. If I'm not tested by adversity, and if I can't respond to it properly, then I'll know that I have some work to do. Where do we find the practical suggestions by Krishna of how to respond to the adverse situations that inevitably come up in the material world? Well, one place is in the 13th chapter of the Gita, verses 8 through 12. Remarkably, in two sections, the section before 8 through 12, Krishna says that here are the interactions of material nature. And we all know that categorically, whatever interactions we have with material nature are going to be unproductive. It's the same old thing. What do they say? New day, same stuff, new day, something like that. Yeah. Huh? I can't hear it. New year, new me? Yeah, it was a different concept I was mentioning. In fact, I can't say it the way people say it because it's crass. But in any way, it's repackaging of the same stuff over and over again. And so categorically, the material world is like that. And Krishna, in fact, if I have a Bhagavad Gita, I should just read you the section because it's a short section. If you'll hand me a Bhagavad Gita, and in any Hare Krishna temple, you should be able to get a Bhagavad Gita within 7 seconds or less. Otherwise, maybe a lawsuit or something. Listen, you're going to be amazed. You ready? Yes. Okay, so first of all, Krishna mentions the field of activities and its interactions. That means material platform, the body. So he says the 5 great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses in the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, and convictions. All these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. And Prabhupada goes on to describe the field as being the working senses and the knowledge-gathering senses. And in our struggle with these senses that Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, when he talks about how we're parts and parcels of him and that we're grappling with these material conditions and different elements. Then Krishna gives in 8 through 12 a list of 20 items which when practically applied bring one above the interaction with the material nature. And here's the list. Humility. Who knew that would be or who would have thought that would be on the top of the list? Humility. Second, pridelessness. Third, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be, is ignorance. Then we get in chapter 12 another list. It's a remarkable list, and if one were to extract the elements of this list and practice them, starting at chapter 12, we come up to text number 1314. You ready? One who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination. His mind and intelligence fixed on me, such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. He by whom no one is put into difficulty, and who is not disturbed by anyone, who is equipoised in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, is very dear to me. My devotee, who is not dependent on the ordinary course of activities, who is pure, expert, without cares, free from all pains, and not striving for some result, is very dear to me. One who neither rejoices nor grieves, who neither laments nor desires, and who renounces both auspicious and inauspicious things. Interesting. Auspicious and inauspicious things I mentioned earlier. Such a devotee is very dear to me. One who is equal to friends and enemies, who is equipoised in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy, who is always free from contaminating association, always silent and satisfied with anything, who doesn't care for any residence, who is fixed in knowledge and is engaged in devotional service, such a person is very dear to me. Krishna concludes the chapter. Those who follow this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engage themselves with faith, making me the supreme goal, are very, very dear to me. So these are unexpected elements of spiritual practice and success. Well, at least I would say they're unexpected elements of self-help genre, which lacks a spiritual goal and tries to deal more with the circumstances of the material world than anything else. Even in the case that Vaisesikadasa was mentioning, for the sake of increasing productivity, we may adopt these temporary feelings of humility and so forth. Bhagavatam then says, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavatiya kinchana sarvaragunas tatra. No, yeneir vindaksha vimuktamaninas toyasta bhavat. Or yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati kinchana. There's a way in which one may toy with these noble qualities, but for lack of an ultimate goal of depending on Krishna, one will succumb again to the false ego in the sense of trying to control the material world, or even use those techniques to control the material world. That's possible also. So we have here a very practical example of Maharaj Ambarish, who's, as I pointed out, glorified by all the great acharyas. So there's nothing wrong with adopting the mood, the attitude of Maharaj Ambarish, using everything in Krishna's service. Even though he's a king, he's known to be fully detached because he doesn't consider anything his. And even though he has some spiritual power, he also doesn't consider that's coming from me. And I'm proposing that that's the not only the standard, but the mainstay of our community. The more we develop this attitude, the more we can increase in service, the more we can increase our sense of cooperation. Because there's always some competition between living beings. And that remains, even in the spiritual world. Prabhupada pointed that out. He said, don't think there's not individuality in the spiritual world. That's Mayavad. But the subscription to hatefulheart.com is canceled. You should cancel that subscription, hatefulheart.com, where you go on and then you find all the reasons to feel envious and hateful towards other living beings. You can always find something that's different in them you don't like. Such and such looks at things differently than I do. And it's a miracle, an absolute miracle, when a person can actually restrain oneself from the material interaction by dint of taking shelter of Krishna, wholly and solely. And even though that person may dress like everybody else, drive a car like everybody else, work like everybody else, there's a fulcrum of power coming from that person's heart because he or she has fully dedicated him or herself to the idea that Krishna is to be served, not me, and doesn't try to take advantage of one's material or spiritual situation. Simply service for service. Ananya cheta satatam yomam smarati nijasaha. When we have that, we have something. When we have brick and mortar, and we don't have that, you have nothing. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, after overseeing, to some degree, the development of a gigantic temple in Calcutta itself, I'm not satisfied, he said. I don't even like it anymore. He said, tear down the marbles, sell it. We'll use it for preaching. Why didn't he like it? Because he perceived a scintilla is what? Scintilla is pretty small. That's why I want to emphasize it. A scintilla touching the third rail. What happened? Everyone's looking at everyone else. You know your research is, it's for the microphone. That's a different thing. Okay, go ahead.
Scintilla is a noun which means a spark, a glimmer.
A what? A spark?
A spark or a glimmer.
Okay, where does it come from?
It comes from Latin, it traces back to Proto-Indo-European roots, ske, which means to shine or to gleam. And then, yes, that's all.
Anything else? Yes.
It comes from the figurative use of Latin scintilla, which means particle of fire, spark, glittering speck, or atom.
And generally, it's talking about a very small quantity of something that's so small, even a scintilla of, on one side, even a scintilla of sincere desire to serve Krishna. In other words, if you see that spark, Krishna, atapi Brahma, atapite deva padam bujadvaya, shadaleshanu grihita evahi, janati tatvam bhagavan mahinno nachanya eko pichiram bachimban. There's a way in which Brahma says, if you find a scintilla, if you have a scintilla of the Lord's mercy through which you have this sincere desire to serve Him, then you can understand everything. But if you're the big powerful person and claim proprietorship, so forth, he said, even if you're a great learned scholar, if you don't have that spark of sincerity and mercy from Krishna, then you won't understand anything. Your knowledge will be stolen. Yes, Jai Madhava Prabhu. And then we have to sing for the, is it the first anniversary? Second already. Second? Okay, go ahead, Jai Madhava.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Thanks for leading us to make japa great again today morning. And I was just reflecting on what you shared, that the material energy is very powerful. So don't try to make adjustments here. You won't succeed, but rather raise to a higher platform by chanting the holy name, because one, it's complete. Everything is there in it. Second, it's the most important thing to make sure that is your priority. And so when you mentioned that, I thought, yeah, that's correct. I forgot about that. Then the question I had was two-part. One is, why does Jiva think, or I think, that I know everything, or if not everything, I know most of the things, maybe I don't know something. And the second part is, what should I do so that I can develop some humility from not thinking I know everything, but at least maybe I know something, but I don't know a lot of things, or better yet, I don't know anything. So if you can maybe help me understand that.
We're parts and parcels of Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Controller, Ishvara Parama Krishna. We have the same quality as Krishna. He's Supreme Controller, we're little controllers. There's no doubt about that. We have some control over material nature, over others, but we're tiny. That's why there's a tendency at some time to say, oh, maybe I could control more, or maybe I can control everything. How do you overcome that? To read Bhagavad Gita. Krishna clearly puts it in a way that it's gentle, but at the same time very straightforward. That Daivihi Esha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duraya. It's my nature. It's divine. You're also in the divine category, but you're going to be overcome by this if you try to control it. And that answers a lot of questions, because by experience we may see that when I try to control material nature, it comes back and controls me twice as hard. I come up with a great idea. Let me develop a system through which I can bring images through wires or even through thin air and project them on a screen. This is my power. And I form a multi-billion-dollar corporation to do that. And then the next thing you know, you're stuck in a corner somewhere going like this. Controlled by material nature. You try to control material nature, I'm so smart, I'm going to create a device. The next thing, device is controlling you. Like, how many hours was it today? 7.5. You get controlled right back by material nature. So practical experience, and if someone becomes wise after some time, and you can become wise after 2 minutes if you read the Bhagavad Gita, then you can realize, oh, that's not my position. I'm not the supreme controller. I'm a part of Krishna, and my glory and perfect existence is in serving Krishna. And if I can just do that, then it's rather simple. We feel naturally satisfied. So we can try it on for size. We have permission. That's what this community is. It's a place where you can enter and you have permission to become the servant of the servant of the servant. You don't have to be a big shot here. That's why we leave our shoes at the door. We're like, okay, I'm humble. I come and I bow down, ring the bells, like, okay, I signed up for this. and then we feel happy. And when you go out and try to fight it out and be the right one and be the controller, then we can see by contrast that it just doesn't work. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for keeping the transcendental vibration going in such amazing ways everywhere we go in the world. Everyone's appreciating the service that you're doing here, because it's in the mood of avoiding the third rail at all costs and also giving mercy to other people. That's the formula.